Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're getting our cameras on. I'll give everybody a second. Thanks for joining us for our 5th session in our 6 Million Reasons Why Dementia Education series. Today's topic is going to be about effective communication strategies. A couple housekeeping items before we get started. You can see us and hear us, but we cannot see or hear you. Your cameras are off, your lines are muted. So if you have any questions, please type them in the bottom in the Q&A box. If you are watching from Facebook, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us there. You can also type your questions into the chat section or the comments. We'll be monitoring those as well, and we'll be sure to answer those These are being recorded, so if you're watching it at a later date, hopefully we answer your questions. You can always contact the helpline though, if there's any questions that you hear that or come up with as you watch later and we don't address them. You can always contact the 1-800 number helpline through the Alzheimer's Association. So introductions, my name is Kim Brackey. I'm with Edgewood Healthcare. I'm Regional Sales and Public Relations Director. I'm based out of, I don't know, sunny, hazy Pierce, South Dakota today. I felt like a farmer the other day when we got some rain, even though I'm not a farmer, and I was like, it's getting rain. So I'm excited I feel like many of us are in the heat and the drought lately. So rain was a welcome thing for Pierce, South Dakota this week. I'll let everybody else introduce themselves as well.
I'm Scott Bernstein, and I'm here in sunny, not quite hazy, Bismarck, North Dakota. And we did all celebrate rain the other day. And good to be with the Edgewood family. I used to be an executive director here in Mandan, so it's a joy to be with you guys. And right now I have my own little business called Scott at the Bernstein Group. So good to be with you.
Thanks, Scott.
Hi, I'm Carla Bruce. I'm the nurse manager in East Grand Forks, Minnesota at the memory care there. My background is orthopedic and rehab nursing. I've had the opportunity to join Edgewood about 3 years ago and am very much enjoying my time there. I also have a personal connection, and I do have my mom in memory care, and I'm hoping I'll be able to share part of that story with you very shortly. So thank you.
Thank you, Carla.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenna Pogarelles, and I'm a senior program manager with the Alzheimer's Association out of our Hermantown, Minnesota location. So it is a bit cloudy here today, but we did get some needed rain here as well. I'm very happy to be here, and thanks to all of to Carla and Scott and Kim for having us on. So looking forward to it.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to Scott. Today, though, like I said, is about effective communication strategies. We all know that as dementia progresses, sometimes in the journey, how we communicate with our loved ones changes as well. Ways we used to communicate with them aren't effective anymore. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, verbal, nonverbal, just different ways of communicating and staying connected as the disease progresses. I'm going to turn it over to Scott. But again, if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A section or comments on Facebook. And we look forward to addressing those questions today if we don't address them on our own. There you go, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim. And absolutely, if you have questions, get them on there, posted, because we want to answer those questions for you today for sure. We know that communication is way more than just talking, because it also is some listening involved, but there's way more to communication than that. Our tone of voice, our facial expressions, our gestures, the attitude, all of those things that come through are going to impact our communication. And none of that changes. In fact, it becomes probably more pronounced when the person is on the journey with Alzheimer's or dementia. The brain is going through changes. And so there are struggles learning new methods to communicate on our part, and they're struggling to decode the messages that they are hearing on their part. So it's a huge challenge at times, but it's what makes us human. We want to retain that sense of communication all through the journey for sure. While they may be losing their ability to understand, if there's one takeaway I want you to walk out with today, they never lose their sense of self. They have an identity. They don't lose that sense of self. And often I think that we look at people who are on the journey that we think they're losing themselves, or we are losing them on this journey. But the truth is, they retain that identity, and we need to be tuned to that identity, because that is going to really assist us in our ability to communicate with them. Carla is on this journey personally. And Carla, has your mom retained her sense of self?
Absolutely. And it's really nice to see how she communicates with other residents in our memory care setting, and how much she enjoys that, just being able to interact with them and be a part of that with them.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. I am a son. I am a husband. I am a father. I am a grandfather. I am an uncle. I am. We all have a lot of I ams in our life. And all of those go to building our identity. And so it's important that we continue to understand the person's personal history. What are some of their habits? What are some of their interests? Because all of those are links that are going to help us to communicate as the journey progresses. So keep that in mind. Sense of self. All right. Simple 3 basic ways of defining the stages of Alzheimer's. There's the early stage, there's the middle stage, and the late stage. And each of them have their own particular challenge as it relates to communicating. In the early stage, which by the way, may have started 20 years before we actually started to see changes, you're going to notice some simple things that we easily blow off. Difficulty finding the right word. Who hasn't had that problem? Okay. And then taking longer to maybe give an answer or a response. There's going to be some withdrawing from conversations because maybe the pace of the conversation feels too fast, but then they'll re-engage. So it's not like they go into separation, but those are all going to be things that are noticed in the early stages, along with struggling to make decisions or do some problem solving, things that may have been before kind of second nature, and they seem to be just a little bit more complicated. And they may react a little bit more emotionally than they did in the past. Well, why not? Because they're starting to experience some frustration. The world seems to be going on and they're trying to catch up. They're playing catch up. And so some of those are the challenges that are faced. 1 or 2 things I would give you. Do not make assumptions when you're starting to communicate with a person who may be in those early stages. The idea that, of course, they should know this. Well, maybe yes, but maybe not. And so we get frustrated in our communication. And I hear this all the time. What do you mean you forgot? You know this. I told you that already. Those types of things. We're making an assumption, and they didn't wake up this morning and thought, how can I frustrate you? They're struggling. So don't make an assumption. The other thing is speak directly to the person. There's many times when we're in a setting where there are just multiple prongs of conversation going, it's what I call the family dance, right? Oh, back and forth and back and forth. And they don't know that they were actually addressed. I mean, they missed the cue that said, you're supposed to respond here. And so if there's something that you definitely need from them, speak directly to them so that they know that they're being addressed. And then you may need to determine what communication method they're most comfortable with. Sometimes people are more comfortable with getting a note that's written because it serves as a reminder. Sometimes people are okay with that thing on the refrigerator that serves as a reminder. Sometimes they're okay with getting a verbal reminder a few times, and they're not going to say, I know, you told me that. But in the early stages, you're going to notice some of those things. They're starting to change. Like Carla, I mean, obviously you've experienced this. So what are some of the first things that you noticed when you're on the journey?
Sure. It's interesting about the notes. And I think sometimes what I found is my mother loves to do word search puzzles. And it wasn't right away, but I noticed in the back of the last page on any of her word search puzzles, she'd have it full with many different things. And sometimes it was a ball game. It was the 2 teams that were playing and the scores. And she'd keep track of those scores. And as I was on the journey with her, I realized it was her way of really, if Carla asked something, I can go back there and see what I had watched. And it was real interesting. There was a TV funeral for an officer that was involved in a situation in our community. And I had the whole funeral that she watched written down in the back of one of her puzzle books. And I think that was for her to be able to relate to if she wanted to get into that conversation at a later time.
Carla, you bring up a really,
amazing.
What I was going to just jump in and say that I felt this with when I was sales and PR director for Edgewood. I had a family that moved their loved one in. And I think I've said this story on a previous one of these sessions. A family who had no idea how advanced mom's dementia was because she did exactly that. She had a notebook that she'd keep notes on. And so each time she talked to the son, John, she would flip to John's page and she'd say, well, how was Billy's baseball game last night?
Yeah.
She'd keep notes, and they all lived elsewhere. And so when they came home and found the notebook, really similar. And it's, I guess, I don't think that's it's not a one-off. I think that's a really common thing that happens where they document. Jenna, I'm sure on the national level, the Alzheimer's Association, or in your role up in Minnesota, you've seen the same thing.
Yeah, I was just going to say I had an experience not too long ago with a gentleman who always wore pocket shirts, and he kept one of those little notebooks right in his little pocket shirt. And anytime we started talking about something, he would get that out quickly and start to scribble the things down. And it made sense for him. And we often, in our care consultations with families, we encourage that. We encourage memory aids because that's what's going to keep people independent, and that's what's going to keep people helping them with their own tasks, further along. So we certainly encourage people to use those memory aids. And we see that even trickle in because, as Scott was mentioning, you don't know where that person is and what part of their brain is being impacted early on. So someone with mild cognitive impairment could have some changes in their memory and just not remember exactly where something might go in a cabinet. So they start to label things early on. And that is a really great memory tool and aid for people as they are beginning this journey.
Carla, is that, so going back to the books, is that one of the first signs you had for your mom? Are you willing to share kind of, or was that early in the process, or is that still now that that's something?
That was actually later in the steps. And I'll kind of take you back on how my journey started. About 10 and a half years ago, my father passed away. And, typically when there's two spouses, you're not as involved with cares and daily things. And so as we started being more involved with mom, I didn't really notice things. And as a nurse, I was struggling with myself too. How did I not pick up on that? And so one of the things that I started noticing is she was retired, and she had a little job being a hostess at a local restaurant. And she would only work a few days a week and just work a few hours. And I would come over there on a day that I thought she had off and she wouldn't be home, or I'd go by the restaurant and see she was there. And I was kind of like, well, I wonder how come she's there today. And she didn't think she was supposed to. Well, she would tell me that they were messing with her schedule. And so they called her and said, where are you? And so she had to go into work. And so this happened quite a few times. And of course, I, as the daughter, was getting a little protective of her, thinking, why are they doing that? And so it really was the manager there that reached out to us after a while and, kind of told us that she wasn't coming when she should. She'd call the night before to find out if she worked. But then she wouldn't show up if she was supposed to work, or if she wasn't to work, she would show up. So that was something that was quite alarming to kind of hear. So as we understood that, we did encourage her to leave that job. Mom, we just want you to be able to spend some time. And the nice thing there, and my husband helped me to kind of realize that she needed to have some closure in that. So we had a little second retirement party for that. And we had her go and stay with my sister, who lives, just out in the Minneapolis area. And she spent a few months there just so that she could kind of have some separation from that and get her back with being with the grandkids and things. And so then when she came back to our community, living alone in a condo setting, she was able then to, okay, now I'm fully retired and I'm able to do things on my own. So I started still allowing her to do her pills and doing those. But then I started seeing some more things with that. The pills were either she was filling them frequently, or I'd see, well, it's Wednesday today, and how come Fridays is missing and not Wednesdays? So there was a little bit of mix up there. So I did have to transition then to, okay, I want to take control of these. That was a challenge for me. I didn't want mom to know she couldn't handle it. So, how could I very nicely say, oh, I'm going to take these? So, I did tell her that I was working with a doctor and kind of rescheduling her medication. So I was going to take those out of her hands, and I would take care of those and make sure she got those every day. So that was just kind of a tip that I used there. That was the one thing that I noticed. The other things that I would find is we when I noticed mail was becoming an issue of not maybe misplacing mail or things like that, she has a key to a mailbox. And the only way for me to be able to identify what was coming in and knowing what needed, to be paid at a certain time, I had to take control of that. And that was fairly early on. And I remember the first time I took the mailbox key away, that was probably the biggest struggle for her. Is she got very angry at me, and it was really hard for me to take that key away, but I needed to understand what was coming in and kind of get an idea for that. I said I was just going to look at it for 1 month's time, and then, I'd get that back to her, but I just needed to know what came in every day. So, she was fine with it once I did that, but it really helped me figure out, wow, I need to take better control of this. I also found out that one of the telephone companies had, I want to say, took advantage of a situation where, they got her to buy into having a device that she'd never ever used. And it took me a couple years to realize she was paying on this device that honestly hadn't even been taken out of the box. So again, those are things that in hindsight, it's like, oh my gosh, how come I wasn't aware of that? And so that was a little struggling to do. So the thing in my heart and mind is I was thinking, how am I going to get the car keys away and the car away? Because I knew that was going to come down the path. And I do have to appreciate and thank our Meals on Wheels team in our community here, because what they did, and I don't even believe at first they knew exactly how much help they were to me, but they came and we had a sit down visit with getting mom set up for Meals on Wheels. And the day that they did that, they said to my mom, I know that you really enjoy coming down to the senior center. But you realize if we have you on a Meal on Wheels service, you do need to be homebound or be in the home and not be able to drive your car and things like that. And I'm not kidding. That day, she grabbed her purse and handed the keys to the lady. And that was a blessing to my husband and I to be able to say, oh, thank you. And that day, we immediately got the car out of there. Now, I know that won't be as easy for everyone, but for us, that was the best blessing we had, because we thought if the mailbox key was such a trigger, can you imagine taking the car away? And so then we worked with our senior rider, those types of things, to be able to still give her that opportunity. Her church was really good of picking her up for services and Bible study, things like that. So we utilized that and just said, oh, Mom, you don't have to worry in the winter to worry about the car and things like that. So I was blessed to be able to make it that easy. So those are little few tips of things that I've seen so far.
Oh man, Carla, you were blessed.
For sure.
But you bring up an interesting point, and it has all to do with communication. Basically, obviously, all of this took place in communication. Mm-hmm. And actually, the stage that you're describing is the moderate mid-stage mm-hmm. for a person, and learning to communicate there is often a challenge, because what people frequently hear is no, 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 no. No, you can't drive. No, you can't take care of your medications. No, you can't handle your mail. No, I'm going to pay your bills because you're not paying your bills. No, 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 no. And I don't know about you. No is not my favorite word. And so think about it, if that's all you're hearing. But what you were doing was turning no's into yeses, which is a huge thing that we need to keep in mind. Rather than saying, no, you can't drive, you said, oh, all right, and you gave an alternative. I mean, fortunately, she handed her keys over, but there are people who are not that willing to do that. But you can turn that into a yes by saying, and we're not going to forget that you want to get to church. We're not going to forget that you love to grocery shop. We're going to make sure that you get to your doctor's appointments. There's going to be meals that are coming to your house, blah, 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 blah. You go on so that you point out all the advantages to the no, that the yes is actually way bigger. And as the disease progresses, sometimes people are going to say, well, I'm going outside. And you're like, oh my God, this can't be. It's 20 below zero. The wind is blowing. There's no way. And so we go, no, you're not. No, you're not going to go outside. No, it's cold outside. And they're like, now we're in this, right? We're in a power struggle and we're in a conflict, just what you didn't want, just what they don't want. And so rather than saying no, I always challenge people, find out how you can say yes right away. And so when they say, well, I'm going outside, and in your head, you're like, no, you go, oh, hey, yeah, not a bad idea. I'll tell you what, though, before you go, why don't you have a good cup of coffee? Because it's chilly outside and you want to warm up before you go outside. Or let's make sure that and you start to turn that no into a sequence of small steps. And all of a sudden, the person probably isn't interested in going outside. They don't want to go outside. They look out the window and they go, I'm not going out there. The weather's terrible. So only by saying no, you made that an absolute. This person's heading out the door, whether they got a coat on or not. And so take the no, make it a yes.
Scott, I think you also bring up a point of something that I know families have battled with sometimes with mom and the ladies. Well, mom always used to wear these fancy outfits, or dad, whatever. I just think of mom and like the heels and stuff. Or I've had families say, mom shouldn't wear those shoes anymore. One of our memory cares in South Dakota, mom always would wear heels, and they tried to put her in flats and she refused to, but guess what? She had always worn heels. Yep. So by trying to take her out of those flats or taking her out of those heels, and again, they tried to shorten the heel and make it a safer, chunkier heel, but that was part of her identity.
Yes.
And it was also sometimes that's not very practical. Those shoes don't match those pants mom would have always matched before. However, is that worth the battle of fighting?
Yeah.
If mom decides that she picked out her outfit today and she's happy with what she's wearing and it's practical, it's not going to be unsafe for her to wear. She's not wearing shorts and a t-shirt in the winter, or she's not wearing a parka and her snow gear in the summer. Is it doing any harm?
No. And that's just a fight not worth having.
Right.
I mean, why frustrate them? And part of it is that they're resorting to what is most known and most common. And so they're also, many times people say, they're wearing the same clothes. I mean, it's just the same thing over and over and over again. And I'm going, well, you know what? If she likes the white blouse and blue slacks, only buy blue slacks and white blouses. Don't come with a big wardrobe. Or try to change your mom and say, Mom, I bought you all these new clothes. She doesn't remember you bought her new clothes. She doesn't care about the new clothes.
And they're probably not her clothes in her mind anymore.
That's right. They're like, who do these
clothes are these?
Yeah, I know this. I wear this every day. So, don't go into that zone.
Carla, I'm sure you see some of that at memory care. Is that something that you see pretty frequently with your mom or with anyone else?
Yes. One of the things that is a little bit easier to manage when you're maybe in a memory care setting is that you can offer those choices, but you can make those choices match, to say, would you like to wear this outfit, and make it more of a match. One of the things I see a lot, though, is putting on the coat. Well, when you identify with it, are they putting on their coat because they want to leave? Or are they putting on their coat because they're darn cold? A lot of times they're just cold because they, bodies and things like that, they do tend to be more cold. So finding out is, how would you like a sweater, and not realizing maybe their sweater is as handy as the jacket was that they found.
Yeah. And Carla, you bring up a powerful point, and that is that many times we ask way too complicated a question. We ask these multiple layers, and they get the choice of A, B, C, D, E, or all of the above. And you do a very, very, very great illustration. Do you want to wear the blue blouse, or do you want to wear the red blouse? And you're posing the answer in the question rather than frustrating them and saying, go find something to wear today. Well, They will. Right. And then all of a sudden you don't like what they're wearing, which is crazy, but posing that, even with choices, do you want to have the ham sandwich or the turkey sandwich versus what kind of sandwich do you want? What do you want for lunch? Oh.
Or Scott going to a restaurant like the Cheesecake Factory where you have a menu that I don't think anyone can actually figure it out because
Yeah, I
there's
know.
85 different pages in it. And I love the Cheesecake Factory, don't get me wrong. But I think of even just a simple menu, that can be really overwhelming for somebody to even figure out. And then sometimes names get kind of fancier. What's this? Why aren't they just calling it a ham sandwich? Why are they calling it the,
Yes.
I don't even know. I can't think of a fancy ham
somewhere.
sandwich name right now, but.
Yeah, in fact, this is sometimes a telltale, and people, when they look back, they think of this, they went to Perkins and the menu, what do? Everybody picks up the menu, right? And so everybody's staring at the menu and they go, well, are you ready to order? And somebody says, yeah, I'm ready to order. And they go, I'm going to have the cheese omelet with blah, 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 blah. And guess what? I think I'll have the same thing. Why did they do that? Because they were not following the menu. It was overwhelming to them.
Right.
But it was real easy for them to just say, I think I'll have the same thing.
Yeah.
So you start to look at those things that we do. We're all compensators. And those are little telltale signs many times. But also, take time to laugh. I mean, there are just things that are plain funny. And you don't laugh to mock, but you just kind of go, oh my word. And you just enjoy the moment. I find many, many times people don't enjoy the moment anymore. They're just kind of hyper all the time. Carla, your mom still has a sense of humor, obviously.
Absolutely. And I don't think a moment goes by that she's not laughing about something. And I can tell you a cute story of mom being in the memory care where I work is been a blessing for me also. She's been in there about 3.5 months and she's doing so well there. And I'll share with you a little bit in a little while of how I came to a decision of when is the time to look at other options for mom. But one of the cute things is I wanted to understand is she still understanding that I'm her daughter? Because as I cared for her prior to taking her in, there was one time, and it was really hard to hear. She was in a point of, she was not happy that morning when I was helping her get up. And she said, you may be Carla, but you're not my Carla. And so, every day I think, okay, is she understanding who I am? And so throughout my day, as I'm working there and interacting with all the residents and including my mother, there are times when she'll point to me as I'm walking by and say to another resident that's my daughter, you're my daughter, right? She'll say, and things like that. But this one resident, when she said that to her one day, I happened to walk in after hours one day and she said, there's my daughter. And the resident said, I know, we all know. And so I thought, okay, mom tells him a lot that I'm her daughter. So, and that's good to see at the same sense too. So. Yeah,
absolutely. Here's another point takeaway. As the disease progresses, the person on the journey is a keen observer. And more they're going to start to go to the other senses. So we forget, we don't tap into the other senses when we're trying to communicate many times, but they are very keen observers, but they're poor interpreters. And so we come running in and, we're in a hurry. Like, it's time to go to the doctor. And you thought they were going to be ready and they're not ready. And you're like, oh my word. And so now what are you? You're tense and you're starting to go, we need to get this on. Now you need to get over here. You need to do this. And they're watching you and your face is just like, and your hands are flying everywhere and you're grabbing stuff and everything. So they're a keen observer, but they're a poor interpreter because guess what? They weren't aware they were supposed to be getting ready for the doctor. That just slipped their mind. And so now you appear angry. You're going to be in a combat zone here. And now I got to defend myself against you. And so we need to be really careful about what we're communicating, utilizing the other senses, because they're now picking up on all of those things. Like I say, they're amazing at picking up on the energy field that's around them. I mean, it's like, it's almost alarming, but we forget that. And we're like in a rush and it just makes sense, but it doesn't make sense to them. So we need to keep in mind they're keen observers, but poor interpreters. And what message am I sending right now to them that they are interpreting? And you'll know, because you're going to get a response. And you then are going, where did that come from? Well, guess what? It came from you. That's where it came from. And when I hear people say, oh, they have behaviors, I'm going, well, we all have behaviors. I mean, as long as you're alive, you're going to have behaviors. But chances are their behavior is reflecting your behavior. And so we need to be careful in this whole process of communication. Carla, you were laughing there. Ever experienced that, maybe?
Absolutely. And to your point, one of the things that I found is if you think that you told them about an appointment, you're probably best served by not even talking about an appointment in advance, because what I found is mom would not have that correct, and either she'd be waiting for me a different day or earlier, or when I got there is like, well, I didn't think you were ever going to come. But sometimes it's better to plan an hour in advance of your own time and just go there and say, oh, mom, the doctor called me, wanted to see you. I'm going to help you get ready and we're going to go in, instead of telling her in advance. That always seemed to kind of keep us both a little more settled.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Carla. That's because they fixate on it sometimes. And yeah, and if somebody was always an early, I can think of a family member who on time is for sure late, and early you know what I'm saying? As far as if you show up on time, you're already late. If you show up 10 minutes early, you're on time. But that she likes to be even earlier than that. So she's usually there like 30 minutes earlier. So then she'll be waiting at 9 a.m. in the morning for an appointment that's not till 2, because she's just not wanting to be late, not wanting to miss it. And that's part of her identity. So I think you're 100% right that those appointments sometimes are better served by just showing up and saying, hey, we got lucky and we can get in.
Yes. And I've had family members look at me and say, well, isn't that lying to my mom? Because we already had it scheduled 3 months ago. And I go, no, that's not lying to your mom, because your mom doesn't remember this. And so for lack of a better word, we coined a phrase called therapeuticfibbing, where you just simply make up something in the moment, and it serves the purpose and protects their dignity in the process. If you were ever to do something that would destroy their dignity and put them at risk, obviously you're not going to do that. But the idea is that what you're doing is, rather than saying, again, I've just communicated to you and you forgot, what you're going to do is just go, oh, live in the moment. Because guess where they live? They live in the moment. And you need to live in the moment. We need to be Sherlock Holmes. We need to get behind what they're thinking and get into their pattern of thinking, rather than asking them to come up to our pattern of thinking. Because guess what? We have the fully functioning brain. They have the disease. And so we need to look and say, how is this going to be working for them? How are they hearing this? What are they going to perceive at this moment? And if I'm not getting the right response, it's probably because they're interpreting something in a way that in their brain makes sense to them. So we got to be Sherlock Holmes all the time, and stay on top of it. And then also respond to their behaviors. And yes, they have behaviors, but you know what? There are emotions behind the behaviors. And so they're expressing the best they know how an emotion. So Carla, you pointed out perfectly, people walking around with a coat. Well, first of all, let's just recognize something. As the disease progresses, people get colder, because guess what? Their thermostat isn't working right. So we're like, it's 80 degrees and he's got his coat on. Yeah, that's right, because he feels cold. Okay, so that's perfectly okay. But he may also be trying to communicate something to us. And it may be that he feels more secure when he has his coat on. It may be that he actually has a desire to kind of be reminded of home, because he's not at home right now, or it doesn't feel like home to him. So we need to get behind what they are communicating to us and figure out, what is it, the emotional. And this is often a place where, and Carla, you're better at addressing this than I am, we miss pain signals. Because they're not looking at us and saying, I have a headache. Okay, I have a pounding headache right now. But they have a headache, but they're trying to tell us that, maybe through the way they hold their head, maybe they want to go to a dark place, maybe they want to be alone, maybe they cover their ears, and you're thinking, they're just trying to shut me out. Well, the truth is their head hurts. So we need to learn how to interpret those things that they're telling us.
I think one of the things that you mentioned was about the therapeutic fibbing. And I use that a lot to help with the anxiety with residents. And just this morning, I had a gentleman that was anxious and he said, I need to get out of here. And so in hearing that, I knew he wanted to get out of the building and go somewhere. So what I told him is, let me get a hold of your daughter and I'll find out when she can come this afternoon and we'll take care of that for you. He immediately was relaxed, calm, and said, thank you. And again, I didn't even have to do those steps, but I let him know that I'd take care of that for him. If they're looking for their car, we know they don't have a car out there. I'm not going to tell them that. But what I tell them is, I just had them pick it up to get it serviced. It needed the oil changed and it'll be back tomorrow morning. They had to keep it overnight. Well, that's silly. Why? And then they're fine. Thank you. And then they're not worrying about it. Now, is it going to happen in another half hour? Very possibly, but you can, again, use that same tactic of when it's coming back.
We had a question come in that I think is worth, because this is exactly what we're talking about. When a person wants to go home, but they're already in their home, or if they're looking for their mom or dad and their mom and dad have passed. I think there's every single one of you could probably address this with a similar answer. Jen, I saw you unmute earlier and I didn't know if you had something you wanted to add. And if you want to answer this one, Jenna, and then I think anyone else can add in, but I think that's a really interesting and common when they're looking for mom or dad or they want to go home.
Yeah. And I think Scott kind of started the conversation well with when we were talking about validating that emotion behind the words and not necessarily taking the words for the word itself, but the idea of what that means. And so, oftentimes when I'm working with families, I will think of, and they come to me with this question, I will say, well, what does home represent to them? Or what do you think home represented to them? And often the answers are, safety, comfort. Same thing with mom or dad. What does mom or dad represent to them? Mom and dad usually represent safety and comfort. And so is there something that they are trying to say to us that they're not feeling safe? They're not feeling comfortable. So much like Scott and Carla both kind of intertwined here already, but we're using those therapeutic fib remarks to lessen the anxiety, reduce the stress. Certainly if they're asking for mom or dad, we're not going to say, well, they died 50 years ago. Why are you looking for them? We don't want to give that grief back to that individual who thinks that mom or dad may be around, or they feel like they might be a child again, looking for that safety or that comfort piece. So we might say something that makes sense to them. Well, you know what? Dad's at work right now. He'll be home later in the day, and you can kind of talk to him then. Or mom's at the store grocery shopping. She'll be back later. So whatever makes sense. And I think this is a really good opportunity if you're a professional caregiver to really know what would make sense for that person, and using that person-centered care to know that, if dad was one that worked outside of the house, if mom was someone that worked out of the house, that answer that you're giving them makes sense to them. So that's a real good opportunity to engage with the other family members who may be around, or engage with them to tell me more about your mom. What does she do outside of the house? But not make it to the point where they're feeling really stressed out. But we do want to use that moment to bring some of that comfort to them that they may be looking for.
Yeah, kudos to the person who asked that question. Let's just continue to unpack that, because it's just, it kind of touches on so many things. And that is, you need to look at and validate. Think about it. I want to go home. Well, you already moved out of your home. How many of us would like to get those kind of answers? If all of a sudden I told my wife, I want to go to the grocery store, and she goes, no, you don't. You don't want to go to the grocery store. You don't even drive a car. The grocery store is not, we'd have a fight, okay? So think about it in those terms. So you need to validate what they're actually asking and go to the deeper place. Need to know this, and we know this, but just remind ourselves that what is happening in the brain is kind of like I call the peeling of an onion. There's the outside layer and you keep going down deeper and deeper. So the things that you're going to forget first are the last things that you learn. And the things you're going to retain are the things that are closer to the core. So many times when people are asking for something, we don't put them in the right time zone as it relates to their chronology. And so we're answering a question now that they're asking when they're actually 15 years old, which, by the way, there's a ton of evidence that shows that, you know, during the ages of somewhere between 9 to 15, we have a ton of firsts, right? You know, the first date, the first drive of the car, the first, those firsts lock in. And also those patterns lock in. So I had a little gentleman who every night said, I need to go outside. And people are like, what is with him? But you know what? He had lived his entire life on a ranch. And every night he walked out, looked over the fence to just check the cows. Now, we could say, no, it's dark. You're not going to go out there, blah, 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 blah. But by understanding his pattern, we just opened the door and said, okay. And he just walked out. He just looked around and he walked in and invariably said the same thing. Everything looks good. Because that's where he was living at that moment. And we could have fought all the time, but he was perfectly fine. Once he got that taken care of, he went to bed because that's what a rancher does. Checks his cows, goes to bed. So, you know, we need to validate what it is they're actually looking for, figure out how we can meet that need for them, and in turn, allow them to obviously feel heard, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to communicate to us. Carla, you got to have something to add to this.
Well, you know, and I think the main thing is really decreasing that anxiety. And a story that sits in my mind to see how well this helped an individual is we had a lady that was always worried about her children. And that was an everyday thing. And so how to decrease that anxiety. And I remember the one day when she was looking for her children, I said to her, oh my gosh, I said, they are such great kids. They came and asked me if I needed help with anything. And they went on an errand to take care of some things for me. They'll be back in about an hour. And I said, they are such great kids. Well, they better be, she said, and she was fine. And it decreased that anxiety immediately. And, you know, as you mentioned, it's really living in their reality of what is going through their mind at this time, and what can you help to kind of get them to decrease that anxiety and help with their day and how they deal with that. Yeah,
join them on the journey. Don't ask them to join your journey. Join them on join their journey. But keep in mind, and I could give you a whole bunch of mistakes. I had a little lady who came to me and she said, I need to get home. I need to get home. I know my parents are looking for me. I need to get home. So right there, you know what era she's living in, right? Here's Scott. I did my therapeutic fib. Oh, you don't need to worry about that. Your mom and dad just called and they said it's okay for you to stay for supper. And she said, they called? When did we get a phone? It's like, blew that one right there. So I heard her, but I didn't join her on the journey where she was at. And so that's
Scott, having like you said, the laughing and then the finding a moment to laugh. You weren't laughing at her when you realized. I had a similar one where I had a resident looking for Molly, and we had the life history form where we had all the important people, but I was like, I couldn't figure out who Molly was. And so I said, Molly went to the store, and he looked at me like, and walked away, and the family came later that day, and I kind of raced up and I was like, he asked where Molly was. And I said that Molly was at the store, and they all laughed. Well, Molly was his cow when he was a child. So Molly being at the store was not the right answer, because he knew Molly had turned into ground beef then if Molly was at the store. So I just mean that we learned our lesson. Everybody knew who Molly was from then on, and there was no harm done in the sense. But I think of the times where I had a family say to me once, we're an honest family. We don't lie.
Yes.
So, and while I appreciated that, and but it also told me something about, the therapeutic fibbing was very difficult for them. But again, by telling mom that her husband had died, they were forcing mom to relive that grief and think, I didn't say goodbye to him. I missed his funeral. How am I going to get through a day without him? What am I going to do? And until the family was able to grasp the importance of that therapeutic fibbing, mom couldn't. Every day she relived that loss. Every day was a brand new information.
Yes.
So just try to and I think they got there eventually, but it took a bit. And I'm not saying it wasn't that we were trying to be dishonest people, but all of us, if you can learn from any of the people on this, and some people maybe not want to ask their question here, please call the helpline. The 1-800 helpline is 800-272-3900. I'm going to say it again because it's a great number, and you can call them at 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. But if you want to talk about your story and you think I need some help working on this, it's 800-272-3900. They're an excellent resource for you if you want to talk about your situation and you don't want to talk about it on today's call or today's Zoom, or you're watching this later on and you're thinking, oh, I would have asked the question, but this was recorded 2 months ago. So please give them a call, and they're a great source of advice, and they can offer some thoughts and help you get connected with some resources. So I just let them know. But
yeah, let me just throw in a couple other things sometimes that people ask, and one is they hear some words come out of their loved one that they don't ever remember hearing. I mean, it's like, oh my goodness, what happened here? I've had people come to me and say, my mother never, I mean, she never said anything like this before. And when I went to see her today, it was just like a pirate. I mean, what in the world? And I go, okay. I mean, and they're offended. They're, oh my goodness, mom was a Sunday school teacher. Oh, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I go, okay, did you ever hear those words before? Yeah, I've heard those words before. Okay, here's the thing. Often when we heard those words, or we may have experimented when we were younger and said those words, somebody went, don't you ever say those words. Well, that went into a special place in your brain. It was in this little lockbox that had a key on it and said, do not open. But guess what? The little lockbox has just gone open, and those words are there. And she's not saying those words to offend you. She's not trying to disturb you. She's actually trying to communicate. And these are the only words she's able to retrieve at this moment. So she's just pulling them out. Was she yelling them at you? Well, no, she wasn't. Many times it's very congenial, cordial. But those are the words that are retrievable in that moment. And she's able to get them. Another thing
I want to ask a question, because we did get one that came in that I do want to for sure answer.
Yep.
Sally asked, how do you respond to statements that are untrue and hurtful? I don't want to join in that reality. My mom sometimes says that my dad divorced her and married someone else, leaving her to raise the kids. This never happened to her, but did happen to my mother-in-law. She was married to my dad for 63 years and he died the night, was with her to the last hour of his life. I can't agree with that statement about dad. Sally, that's a good question. I don't know if Scott, Jenna, Carla, any of you have any thoughts on that?
I can jump in on that. I mean, I've certainly witnessed that many times, actually. So 1, you're not alone. And 2, think of it as it's a confusion between events. All right. Again, because the brain is not able to connect all the dots. So it's a confusion between events. So sometimes people are actually reliving something that wasn't theirs to live in the first place. They just heard it, or they witnessed it. It left a profound impact. They've heard the story over and over and over. So in that moment, I always tell people, again, join them on the journey. And so you go, in your head, you're going, this is not true. But validate, you know what, Mom, this was probably a struggle. And it was probably a hard time for you. Do you want to talk a little more? Were you alone? Were you lonely? Were you afraid? Was it hard to make ends meet? just take the journey and let her unravel that. You may actually be hearing an in-laws story, but it's so embedded in them because it was such a scary thing or stressful for them. So if you just keep blowing it off, you're not going to help that. It's not going to go away. It's just going to embed it even more. Allow them to simply vent that out. And you're going, oh my word, this can't be. It dishonors my dad. No, it doesn't dishonor your dad. It's not, because she's not saying it to actually remember diss your dad. If she were in her fully functioning brain, she would never say this.
Right.
This is
that's I think one of the most important points to make to Carla. I don't know if you want to add to it, but that she is not.
No.
This isn't healthy version of mom. This is mom with Alzheimer's or dementia. Carla or Jenna, do you want to add anything to this?
And I think, just supporting her and then trying to kind of see what it is you can do now to kind of help her through that is probably the best way to work it.
Yeah, and I think both Carla and Scott kind of hit the nail on the head. It's really that feeling behind those words. Was she somehow feeling lonely or betrayed? And it may have nothing to do with dad, but that's just something that popped up into her head of a story that she remembers from. It could have been anybody that was talking about something else. And I think what's hard as an adult child, as another caregiver, is to separate that for ourselves and to know that, you have your memories of dad and how he was and how important he was in that life and how their relationship was. And she's, like Scott saying, just kind of confusing those stories. But there is a feeling underneath that. And that's the really part to really focus on, is that feeling underneath that, and not necessarily the actual word that she's using. She's using those words to display that feeling. And we'll talk about it actually at our last session too, which is around behaviors and understanding behaviors. And so that will come back up in our conversations, I'm sure.
Yeah. And you know what? Respond to the emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes in the later stage, people can be very emotional. And it's not uncommon for a family member to, start to talk to mom and she just starts to cry, or dad starts to just get really kind of somber. And they're like, oh, come on, it's a beautiful day. Cheer up. Blah, 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 blah. No. Just put your arm around them, because touch is important. Okay. Mm-hmm. Let them know they're not alone. And if they're crying, just join them. Just join with them. Be in their sorrow or their sadness, because you're validating them at that point and you're letting them know that they're still there. And remember, they don't lose that sense of self. They know that there's still a self and what they're feeling is important. So just join them on the journey as much as you possibly can.
Thank you for that question. I think that's a hard one. And I think different versions of that, Sally, do come up. That's a hard one though. So I think thank you for asking that. And hopefully this helped give some thoughts to that. We are getting close to the end here today. Scott, I'm going to let you maybe give us some final thoughts. I don't know if we got through everything. The next session, like in the last session that Jenna said, is understanding and responding to dementia-related behaviors. So if some of that is interesting to you, come back and join us for our last session. That's on July 21st. But Scott, any final thoughts today on anything for effective communication strategies wherever in the disease?
Yeah, first of all, just remember this is a sampler plate, okay? Because I teach much longer sessions on this where we actually do some hands-on experimental type of things. And so you actually get to practice, which is important. And know this, what you are probably experiencing in communicating with your loved one, while it feels very individualized because it's you and your loved one, you're not alone. That's why that 1-800 number is so vitally important. And rather than be in a place of, ruminating on this for hours and hours and hours, pick up the phone at 2:00 in the morning and call 1-800. All right. And then I would just also say North Dakota, one of the best things that they ever did, and this is for North Dakotans, okay? The North Dakota legislature linked with the Alzheimer's Association. So if you're in a place in North Dakota and you're like, oh my word, you can actually have a care consult for free. The Alzheimer's Association will either virtually meet with you, or in some cases, when things get, fully open, meet with you. And so don't be on this journey alone. Gathering as many supportive backup people as you can. And also, this is where we are many times in denial. I always tell people that when, somebody gets a diagnosis of cancer, the casserole brigade shows up. And everybody is like, oh my goodness, what can I do? While you're in treatment, I'll take care of this and I'll do this. But this is a long journey. This is a long journey. And so it's important to have some people on either side of you, family members, friends, who can also support you as a care partner, because the stress on you many times makes communication even much more difficult. And you start to see the person as the enemy versus we're working through this together. So you're not alone. Reach out, Edgewood, whatever.
Thank you, Scott. Good final thoughts. How about from you, Carla? Anything else you would like to add for today?
I think it's just utilizing those support systems. I know for me, even as a nurse, just not even knowing that the community, that Edgewood Memory Care was almost in my back door or my backyard, and knowing what they had to offer and being able to allow my mother the opportunity to, be in such a community where she can get all the services she needs. And I don't have to worry about her. I had her, under my care after a significant fall, and I didn't know how I was going to manage that 24 hours a day and be able to keep her safe. And so just kind of some of that guilt of, you can't do it all. And so just making sure that you know the resources and finding out what there is for her. And she's enjoying every day of it and is happy. And that's a great thing. And that's what family and friends say. She looks so happy. And so it's great.
That's wonderful. Jenna, any final thoughts from you?
I think both Carla and Scott, again, said it beautifully, and that you're not alone in this. And that's something that we take very seriously at the Alzheimer's Association. And yes, we are here 24/7. And as Scott mentioned, for care consultations, we do those nationwide through that 24/7 helpline, and soon we'll be back in person to be meeting in offices as well. So please reach out to us and know that your journey, we're going to be with you as much as we can.
Thank you, Jenna. We had a comment that came in that said this was great. Thank you, guys. So pass that on to you guys in case you didn't see that question that came in. Thank you so much, Scott, Carla, Jenna, for being on today. I think this was helpful. I hope that the theme of not being alone, I think that it's not being a casserole disease, that people don't. I had a gentleman once say, this is embarrassing and I wish I had cancer. So that gave me pause right away. Because it broke my heart that somebody felt that way. So I want everybody, if you're paying attention to this, to know that you are not alone. There's a lot of people who have gone through this before too. And unfortunately, it's a community that nobody wants to join, but we are tied together by something. So please don't ever try to suffer in silence. Thank you again for those that joined us today on Zoom, on Facebook. Thanks if you're watching later on in the recording. Just a reminder that our last session in this series is on Wednesday, July 21st. It's going to be about understanding and responding to dementia-related behaviors. Behaviors is a word that really has a negative connotation, but as Scott said, we are alive. We all have behaviors. We all, so try not to look at it in that sense. And we're going to talk a little bit about that next time, some triggers, how to intervene, more about communication, I think, next time too. So thank you for those that joined us today. And we hope you will join us again next time. Again, that 24/7 helpline is 1-800-272-3900. ALZ.org also has a plethora of resources out there with articles, links. There, you can go onto their website and you could get lost for hours if you have time. If you just want to look around at different stages of the disease, different resources available, different types of dementia. Maybe you have a loved one with Lewy body dementia and it's a little more specific. There's so much out there for you. This Edgewood has a YouTube channel, and all of these series, this entire series will be on the YouTube channel until the end of October. Once the series concludes in the end of July, it'll all be posted. And so recorded those. So if you have any family members, loved ones that did not join us today, and you think, gosh, my brother, sister, father, mother, whoever it would be, should really listen to this session, know that they are recorded and you can get in touch with us or view them on that YouTube page after the 21st. Thanks again for everyone joining us today. I hope you are all doing well. Thanks again, presenters, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.